This episode of the Golf Unfiltered podcast is brought to you by WorldwideGolfShops.com. Be sure to go out to WorldwideGolfShops.com for all of your equipment, apparel, and accessory needs. They've even got training aids. They've got all the great stuff from all the brands that you hear on our podcast every week. So once again, that is WorldwideGolfShops.com.
You're listening to the Golf Unfiltered podcast, your source for in-depth interviews with the biggest names, brands, and personalities in golf. Our mission? To keep you informed and help you enjoy the game even more. And now, the owner and host of the Golf Unfiltered podcast, Adam Fonseca.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the Golf Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam from GolfUnfiltered.com. You know where to find us on social, at Golf Unfiltered, and you can send me an email, adam@golfunfiltered.com. Folks, you know who we like to say hello to, our friends over at thehackersparadise.com, to all of you listening to this on their forums or on their feeds, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you can find podcasts. And of course, hello to our friends over at Cleveland, Srixon, and Zegzio. Folks, before we get into today's episode, I wanted to just remind you that we are part of a larger network. There are 2 additional podcasts that I would love for you to go listen to, including Off Course, hosted by Dan and Rob, and, of course, Range Days, a very in-depth look at golf equipment, all the things that you would want to know, also on the network over at THP. Today, folks, we are talking to 2 guests. We are talking to Mr. John Sinclair and Zach Kozuchowski. It was a name that I had to practice a couple times, so Zach, I hope I did you well. These 2 individuals, they are from TPT, and so if you're familiar with the TPT Golf Shaft line, a couple years ago now, I think, they came out with what was their blue line, and really took the golf shaft business by storm, insofar as it was something a little bit different. And over time, while there were a lot of golfers that really enjoyed those golf shafts, I've tried it, I really liked it as well. A friend of mine actually has it in his driver now. There were also a couple instances when, things broke. And we actually talk about both of those things today on the show, because we are also diving into their newest upgrade, the TPT Red Range line of golf shafts, which, as you'll hear in today's conversation with John and Zach, are not only an upgrade to the technology, but they also address the defects that they unfortunately experienced in some outliers, some pretty high-profile outliers, to say the least, at least on the professional tour circuit. So it's always a good thing when companies come on and they're able to talk about not only their futures, but also address the things that happened in the past. And they do a great job today. And I just want to reiterate that, TPT is a company that wants to kind of, just push the boundaries a little bit, as cliche as that phrase is, because this is a company that did not start off in golf. And we'll touch on that in the conversation, of course. But they have made a product that, maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe it is. But at the end of the day, it truly is an innovative way to design a golf shaft. And it's just a really interesting conversation. Both Zach and John go into a fair amount of detail, especially John being on the fitting side. He's a PGA teaching pro as well. And he talks about how he just, in his students and the people that he fit, a noticeable difference, improvement, when switching to the TPT Red Range. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Really quick, too, just kind of a local thing. You guys know I'm in the Chicagoland area, and, there's a lot of smaller businesses that are doing better now, as Illinois, at least at the time of this recording, has moved into phase 4 of its reopening plan. And it's, not to say that we're better than anyone, because certainly we're not in many ways, but it's encouraging to see that we are moving forward, while unfortunately a few other places aren't moving at the same pace, or at the very unfortunately moving back in some instances. And so I just hope that everyone stays well. But here in Illinois, there are, and specifically my hometown, there are a couple small businesses that are really, they weren't doing so hot, but they're doing better. And I was thinking the other day, my hair got all shaggy, and I'm like, I really need a haircut. And I hadn't gone to a barber in God, months. I don't even remember the last time I had gone. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go try to go to my regular spot. Uh, it's called Genuine Barbers in Lamont, Illinois. It's just right there on Main Street in downtown. If anyone in local is familiar with that area, and I was able to go in, and they took all the precautions. They're following the rules. They're doing the things the right way, and it's just nice to see that my guy Gio over there is doing better now. And we had a good conversation while I was getting my hair cut, and it's one of those small things that you can do for yourself that everybody needs at one point, right? It's a relaxing experience, at least it is for me. And you guys are probably thinking, Adam, why are you talking about a haircut? But it's just an important small thing that go out and support your local small businesses. And if you're in the Lamont area, go out and see Gio over at Genuine Barbers. Tell him I sent you. It's downtown Lamont. He does a good job. So, at any rate, that's enough of that. We're going to have a quick break here for one of our sponsors, and then we will be back to talk about the TPT Red Range Golf Shafts. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Ben Hogan Golf Equipment Company. No big hype, no big price, but definitely a big deal. Take advantage of their factory direct model where you cut out the middleman and get the best products shipped to your door direct from the company. They've got a demo program to try out their products before you buy, a trade-up program to get these clubs in your hands even quicker, and special financing where you can split your payment into 4 to make these clubs even more affordable. Go to benhogangolf.com to learn more. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we got 2 guests today. We like to have multiple guests on. It seems to be a trend that's emerging here on the GU podcast. We've got Mr. Zach Kozuchowski, and we've got John Sinclair. Both are here to talk a little bit about TPT Red Range Shafts. And gentlemen, thanks so much for hopping on. I know it's been a crazy time out there in the industry. It's nice to see both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be with you, Adam.
So, Zach, let's start with you really quick. You and I have probably spoken more often than John and I have. It's a pleasure to meet both of you, I guess, face-to-face a little bit over this. But why don't you talk a little bit, Zach, about your experience working with TPT and how you're involved?
Sure. So my background is actually in the media side of the golf business. I used to work at a company over at Golf WRX that some of your listeners may know. And almost 3 years ago now, I made the decision to walk away from Golf WRX, which was an incredible amount of fun, but to start working with brands specifically. And TPT was one of my first clients. So at the time, TPT was just starting to go mainstream. The shaft had been used by Lydia Ko at the Olympics, and it was just starting to get some play with Justin Rose in the bag. So it was really a great opportunity to start working with the team to start telling this Swiss engineering story about how the shafts are differentiated from everyone else's. And along the way, of course, I got to know John, who's actually involved in designing the shafts to perform for the best players in the world and everyone else. So it was a really good opportunity for me to jump in when things were moving and things were hot, and really make TPT a household name in the shafts world.
And John, Zach kind of set it up nicely there. He was giving us a little bit of your background prior to getting started here, and he had mentioned that you were involved in the design. You're also a PGA Tour coach. You're a fitter. You got a pretty good resume there, John. When did you start getting involved?
It's been about 4 years, I think now, if I give or take a little bit. I met these guys at the PGA show. A friend of mine, Jean-Jacques Rivet, is a biomechanist, and I worked with him on with some of the European tour players, and got to meet him. And we always would meet at the PGA show. And he called me over and said, "Come to the hotel. We're going to have our meeting." And I was like, "Great." And I go over there, and he takes me down this hallway and sits me in front of these guys and says, "You don't need to talk to me this year. Talk to them." And he walked away. That was my introduction. And they showed me a shaft, and at that time I was pretty jaded, I would say, to be the least, about golf shafts, trying to get my players to perform. I'd recently had a player who broke his shaft and had to, he's out on the web.com, great player, Paul Barjon, who we can talk about him a little bit, amazing player. And I knew it wasn't his golf swing. I knew it was the shaft. We could not replace it. And he was hitting the ball all over the place. And it wasn't his golf swing. And so when I met these guys and they said, "Hey, we can we can make the shaft exactly the same every time. I pretty much went, I got up and started to walk away, and Francois grabbed me and he set me down and goes, no, 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 really, we can. And I was like, I don't believe you're going to have to prove it. So I came back home. I got a machine that I actually got two of them. I sent one to Switzerland, and I kept one where I could actually measure the shafts to a little bit of a degree, and then send the information to them. They could make me a shaft. And I took 7 tour players, PGA tour players, and took their gamers, measured them, sent them to TPT. They sent me shafts, and the tour players couldn't tell the difference. And that was like the biggest eye-opening moment of my whole career, I think, in club fitting. Because before that, to be honest, you're guessing. I mean, you're absolutely guessing out there, and I hate guessing. Anybody out there that knows me knows that I just can't take it. And these guys were able to repeat the shaft. And Francois calls me and he goes, so why aren't they playing them? I said, well, you made us a good backup. Thanks. I mean, This is good. Now they have to be better. And so that's when I started to go back and forth between Texas and Switzerland. And we started working on shafts, and the Blue Range was born out of that. And we really started to see some club head speed picking up, and the dispersion get ridiculously straight. And then Paul Barjon, last year on the Canadian Tour, we recorded his last 174 drives in competition from where he was aiming and wanted the ball to land, and his dispersion was 54 yards wide, and at I think it was 320 something average.
Wow.
And that was fun, and that's obviously one of the big reasons he had won. Had this happened, a couple years before, when I first ran into TPT, he'd already be on the PGA Tour. So it's a special player, and he's certainly got the game, and he's good enough to be there, and he'll be there.
Yeah,
TPT
I would say
really
that's
helped
fun.
him.
I would say that's fun with that dispersion and length. That would make it fun for me too.
And it's not like that's an outlier.
Sure.
That's happening to player after player after player, and the new red range is actually making everybody straighter. I just fit a guy right before I showed up here. He had the old Blue Range 17 MKP, and now he has a 17 high, and he gained 7 yards and was straighter. It was unbelievable. So the red range actually improved the golf shaft, which who comes out with that? Most manufacturers, they come out with, it's not always better. This actually came out and it was better, and it's amazing.
So I want to talk a little bit back about something you mentioned, John, and Zach, I'll get your thoughts on this too. You had mentioned that when you first met the folks over at TPT, they had said that we can make the same shaft over and over again, or they could say, and I forget exactly how you put it, I'm paraphrasing. Just so our listeners understand, John, that's something that is a problem with golf shafts. You will find differences from one to the next, if I understand correctly.
100%. I mean, when you hand roll a shaft, they put them on there and they have machines do it, or, they have actually people hand rolling them on their tables. You have the different flags they have. If anybody's ever seen that, they have those different flags, and they'll put them at different places during the shaft to get the profile that they want. But imagine doing that over and over again exactly the same way as a human. It's virtually impossible, because we have to line up the zeros for the stiffness, and then we got to line up the 45s for the torque. And who can do that on a tapered shaft? I mean,
right.
As a human, that just really just can't happen. I don't blame the people that make it. I mean, they're doing a great job, but it's the process where they can't roll those flags the same way. And it also creates a spine through it. And so in today's shafts, when we're moving the head, to -1 or +1 or square, it's hard to fit somebody. And sometimes all of a sudden you'll see their club head speed go up or down when you click the shaft, because the profile is changing when you move that shaft around in the head. So, some places like Titleist that do a good job of actually, or not Titleist, Callaway, keeping the head in the same place, but they're the only ones that do that. So it's very difficult to fit a shaft. And then, of course, I would always just give them the shaft I fit with.
Right.
And then I would replace it versus because you know that's going to happen. You already have the variable of the tip and the head, and then you have the shaft in there. Hardly anybody gets a driver that feels anywhere close to the one they were fit to. That doesn't happen with TPT and their process because there's no spine. And I challenge people all the time to see, hey, see if you can tell the difference. If you can tell the difference, I've told a guy a couple days ago, if you can tell the difference on which shaft I fit you in and this one, I'll give you the shaft for free. And I gave him 3 shafts, and he was like, no, sorry, can't do it.
Wow. Well, that's quite the testament. And Zach, someone who came from, Golf WRX, friends of ours, we're friends with them. And then certainly now what you do with the media side for TPT. I mean, you're a guy that I'm sure has looked at countless amounts of shafts. John, certainly you have as well. But Zach, from your perspective, the technology that you've learned and now you represent from TPT, I mean, what has that done not only for the messages that you have to convey to the golfer, but also even for your own game?
Sure. John brought up a really important point. So when I was at Golf WRX, we did a lot of these media events or experiences with big brands like TaylorMade, like Titleist, and like Callaway. And we would go to these exclusive fitting centers. And as John described, you get fit for your club and you don't get a club built and then sent to you. You take that shaft, you take that club head, because the whole thing is we want to make sure that the TrackMan results we were seeing, the range, the course performance that you experience, we want you to take that home with you. We don't want there to be any variables. So John is explaining this very interesting meeting that he had with Francois, who's the co-founder of the company in Switzerland. And John is saying, I don't believe you. You have to prove it to me. And what's unbelievable about what TPT does is that it's a totally different process the way you make the shaft. So all the other shaft manufacturers, the way they're making shafts now, the way they've made shafts for decades is through this handmade process, this rolling process. And John will tell you, it's not as though these manufacturers are doing a bad job. They're making very good shafts with the process they have. But the process that TPT uses is just something separate and distinct. It's something that actually allows the company to produce a shaft that you can create the same characteristics, the same profile, the same performance, the same things over and over and over again. So, I wonder if TPT being the Swiss company and not actually being, a traditional golf company, not coming from the golf space, I often wonder, is it their outsider perspective that allowed them to even think that they could get away with doing something like this? Because if a big shaft manufacturer decided to change to this process, think of the risk involved from the big guys. They have these factories that are built out with all of these materials. They have these workers that are trained on how to do it. To change from the way that they make shafts now to the way that TPT is making shafts with automation, it's a scary proposition. So what's really admirable about TPT is that they were willing to make these investments. They were willing to take the risks. And luckily we can look back now. I think they've been on this project for about 5 or 6 years now, John, and we can say, that's definitely better. That's definitely different. From a marketing perspective, from a branding perspective, which is the hat that I wear with TPT, the most frustrating part of the game to me is even though these shafts are made totally different, they still look like a golf shaft, right? A golf shaft still has to look a certain way. It has to be, 45 inches long in a driver. It has to have some taper and has to be round. So,
right.
And most golfers don't know how golf shafts are made to begin with, right? If you polled golfers on the street, maybe they have some awareness of their shaft is handmade because some companies have used that, rightfully so, to communicate the specialness of that shaft. That an expert made it by hand and it's precise and it's special. But how do you talk about the benefits of automation without people understanding that all shafts are made by hand? So it really takes somebody like John, to get into a fitting bay and have John say, this shaft is different, this shaft is special, and I'm going to prove it to you. The whole nature of the industry with fitting and the technology we have, there has to be something real. There has to be proof. And that's one of the reasons that TPT has chosen to sell, its shafts and specifically the new Red Range shafts through fitters is because, as John described, you can make a shaft to the most precise measurements possible, these duplicate shafts that he originally started with tour players. But if they're not better than what you're playing, what's the point? So the whole thing with TPT has been, how do we take shaft technology with this new technology that we've developed that we have a lead on with, and how do we use it to create new and different profiles that give fitters like John Sinclair the opportunity to give golfers that extra 7 yards or 14 yards. So it just doesn't take a good product. It takes a great fitter. It takes a willingness of a golfer to learn. And I think that's kind of the gist of getting the most optimum fit possible, is you have to put yourself in the hands of an expert, and you have to have some level of trust in that person, right?
Yeah, well, trust goes a long way, especially with fitting. And I'd imagine that, products like TPT, and especially the Red Range, and I want to get back to the benefits of the Red Range, because John, you mentioned something about how folks that you've been fitting are just simply hitting the ball straighter. It's got to be pretty cool to, as Zach put it, prove that this is actually helping your game with all the data. And golfers are getting pretty smart these days.
Yeah, it's important for them to come in, and everybody has all the equipment now, the launch monitors, so they can truly see. It's not like, oh, yeah, it's looking really good, like maybe we used to. You could really, now you can prove it to them and show it to them. And the way I would go through a fitting is to let them warm up completely, hit their gamer driver, then we hit a few until I find the right one, and then we just keep going back and forth until we get 10, maybe sometimes a little more if they're not tired. The one I did today, I think he ended up doing 14 of each shaft, and really proving that, look at your dispersion, look at your average distance. I'm not so much interested in the, comparison of longest to longest. I want to see what you did in a fair comparison out on the golf course, and where is your average now? And when I start talking about, well, he hit it 7 yards further. Well, it was on average. He hit it 7 yards further. Well, on average, that's almost a club, closer to the green. On average, that's a big deal. And if it's straighter, that means you're in the fairway, which is another big deal, right? So
very big, yeah.
So when we show them these things and the consistency of the TPT shaft, the one thing that you'll see right away is the other shafts will come through, and they'll have a pretty wide spot of where they're hitting them, and then just about, I'd say 80% of the players would be a pretty fair. They're get very, very tight.
Yeah.
And this guy today was 95-ish swing speed. And I mean, it looked like a dime in the middle of that shaft. And we had to beat it because both of them, he had the blue range shaft and now we had the red range shaft. And we actually beat it with performance, and he got a little bit more ball speed. He got the ball up a little higher with the new shaft than what he was, and that's how he gained the little extra speed. The launch condition improved just a little bit. But that consistency in that shaft and that delivery from the golfer is very important. Because, last week I had another fitting where it ended up he was just hitting it a little low in the toe. But it was, again, a little, dime quarter-size little spot he was hitting it in. And we just adjusted his stance to where he could hit it up and just slightly towards the toe in the middle of the club. And that, now the ball speed's really going up. And that makes it much easier on the TPT instead of a shaft that's coming in there with a little bit of wobble. And now we're hitting it all over the face.
Yeah, I can imagine that makes your job a little bit easier.
Way easier. It's so much better now because I'm not guessing. I had a former number one player in the world come see me to fit his driver shaft. And now this is probably 5 years ago, right before I met TPT. He comes in on the wall in the back of my bay. There's 30 driver shafts, all the same profile, different ones. The company was nice, the shaft company, and the manufacturer was nice enough to send me all for this player. And he walks in, he flies in. We're only doing a driver shaft today, fitting. And he looks at the wall and he goes, "What are we doing with all those?" And I said, "Well, I'm hoping one of them will work." "Well, how are we going to know?" I said, "You're going to hit them until one of them works." And he goes, "Well, you're just guessing?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You're guessing. I fly all the way in here and you're guessing?" I said, "I'm being honest."
Yeah.
I said, "I know what you need, but I just don't know which one of those is going to work." And sure enough, by the end of the day, a lot of rest time and back and forth, we came up and didn't have to hit all of them. But literally, I just didn't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And TPT has given me a way to stop that. And now I can move the ball right, move the ball left, move the ball up, move the ball down from player to player within a pretty small margin.
So I'd imagine that example you just outlined, John, is a good one. Zach, for you, who is more on the marketing side, and you have to talk to fitters, you have to talk to organizations that are going to put these shafts on the rack. What's the selling point for them? For that exact example that was just shared, is part of your message to club fitters, hey, this is going to make your job so much easier?
Definitely. I mean, there's a few things. I mean, this is the most precise shaft on the market. I believe that. I know John believes that. He wouldn't talk about it the way he does if he didn't believe that. That these can lead to the highest possible level of performance for fitters. And with the Red Range, we actually made it very easy. We created something that we call the automatic improvement guarantee. So if you go to the fitter and you purchase a shaft and for whatever reason it's not performing on the golf course like it did in the fitting bay, you bring it back for an exchange or a refund.
Wow.
So I don't know of any other shaft company that's doing that right now. I mean, certainly it's not unique to have that kind of offer, but in the shaft world, that's, once you cut them and grip them and all that stuff, usually it's yours, right?
Right.
So this was our way of trying to relay the confidence that TPT has in its product and in its technology to the end consumer, and to say, hey, even though it looks like a golf shaft still, there really is something different going on inside here.
That's really incredibly important message. I don't have to tell you that, of course, but for the people that are listening, I mean, when they hear TPT, and let's just call it out, guys. I mean, Zach, let's stick with you because this would certainly fall under marketing. We understand that the previous version of TPT, there were a couple outliers where the shafts failed. And now there's this new upgrade to the Red Range. And I'd imagine that one of the questions you probably hear is, okay, well, what's the quality control that goes into this? How would you respond to something like that?
Yeah, so you bring up an issue that's well known, and we talk about it quite often with fitters and with media. So there was a small number of Blue Range shafts that had issues. Essentially what we're talking about is that the fiber in certain places could develop a small little wrinkle. And over time, this wrinkle could cause a weakness, which could cause a break. So TPT noticed this issue, and it was a bit scary at the moment when it became quite apparent, what are we going to do? What's going on? But, TPT had plans to launch iron shafts at that time. I mean, it was like full steam ahead. And, the team in Switzerland decided to pull back and say, well, we can't keep pushing forward in this way until we fully understand the issue, until we fully understand the problem. So, the iron shaft project was put on hold, and all the energy of the company was focused on, okay, I mean, one shaft is breaking here, one shaft is breaking there. Like, this is not acceptable. This can't happen. So the whole goal of the Red Range was that can't happen, of course. And also, it's TPT's first product. This is a company
Right.
that is in carbon fiber innovation in a variety of industries, from America's Cup to F1 racing to satellites to the ski industry. I mean, they've made some really important products out of the carbon fiber that they uniquely know how to develop and know how to shape. So there was also a lot of other improvements that they could put into the Red Range, along with priority number one, we can't see any shaft failures. So it's I mean, there's a part of it that somebody in my position, it's if you have a driver head and you break your driver head, like, you kind of understand that maybe Callaway or Titleist or TaylorMade or whoever's driver head it was, like, this one pushed the limit, or something funky happened or something weird happened. But with shafts, I guess probably because of the violence of the incident that it happens, it's much spookier and it's much scarier to golfers. But we hear stories from golfers who unfortunately had these things happen with the Blue Range, and the conversation, as John can probably testify to, is always, so how do I get another one?
Yeah.
Right? Because and it makes sense, right? The people who bought the Blue Range shaft, the first product from this Swiss shaft company, I mean, they're serious, right? The early adopters, they're early adopters for a reason. So, the Red Range is going to be a much bigger launch. We're going to be in much more fitters. We're going to be much more heavy-handed in getting the word out. So, most golfers who are going to purchase the Red Range is probably going to be the first experience that they've ever had with TPT. And we think that's really exciting. And then, to the people who have had the opportunity to experience it before, and we want them to try this too, because you give a Swiss company a second crack at a new product. I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised.
That's a great answer, Zach. And I think that what
I
that's
would actually like to add something.
Oh, please
to that,
do. Yeah.
Just to make sure everybody understands that's listening out there is, I know we sat down and did the math at one point, and I was responsible for 50% of those breaks. And as far as the people I was fitting to them, I mean, because I'm pushing the edge, I'm trying to get that, one extra yard and doing that. And so I was seeing a lot of these breaks happen, and it wasn't even as much as what people think. It's just unfortunate some of them were high profile.
Sure.
I actually had more other shafts break in my bay than I ever did TPT, but the new one is 0. I can't. Wow. I've given it to I had players that would actually break 3 or 4, and I'd finally say, you just can't have it, and they've still called me into the red range and say, I got to have the shaft, and now they want it, and they can't break it, and we've sent people out. We've had 0 break. I'm not saying it can't break, but
sure,
anything can happen, but 0.
Wow.
So that's a big deal.
Yeah, I would say it is. And, it's great that it's a testament to TPT for taking it as seriously as they did. Not every company would do that. And so I think it's just to reemphasize the fact, especially for the listeners who may be thinking of those outliers, and I think that's a fair word for it, don't make your decision based on those things. Those things happen. Manufacturing tolerances are a real thing, and defects occur. But what we're hearing today from both John and Zach, two guys who know this product very well, is that this is an upgrade, and this is something that you're really going to benefit from. And John, from your perspective as a fitter, you've mentioned that you've gotten follow-up from people that you fit these TPT Red Range shafts for. What are the benefits that they're saying to you? How are their games changing?
Are you talking about the ones that are switching from the blue to the red, or just the ones that are using TPT?
Either or, and maybe even one or the other.
Yeah, obviously the consistency. I mean, when we talked about Paul earlier, to be able to do what he did driving the ball, I mean, he was pretty legendary up there in the Canadian Tour last year for his driving, and everybody noted it. So the average player is just seeing the same thing. And the average man, they're swinging probably 100 miles an hour. That's probably what I see. And that's enough to get crooked. If you're swinging 70 miles an hour, who really cares? I mean, it's not going to get out of the fairway, right? So we just got to give those people more distance. But once it gets around 90 miles an hour, or something like that, 80 something miles an hour, you need to hit it straighter. And the straighter we can hit it, the closer we can get to a direct hit on the back of that ball, the more energy we can transfer into it. And if that ball lands in the fairway, it goes further anyway than in the rough. So, the average player, we're seeing a club to 2 clubs closer to the green on average. So just, driving, isn't the be-all, end-all of your handicap, but it's the thing that most people like, for sure. They like to drive the ball, and then we're finding with strokes gained driving the ball, the distance matters. And if we can get the distance in the fairway, that's helping your guy out there that's shooting 90 now shoot 85. Just because he's in the fairway that many more times and further down. So, I would say from the day one, TPT has done that even with the blue range. And then now with the red range, it's even straighter. And for the most part, going farther. Sometimes it's the same, as the old blue range. Sure. But as a general rule, it's going further and straighter. It's always at least the same as the old one. Probably 80% of the time it's straighter, and then another 50% of the time it's been further. And so that's anybody can just figure out strokes gained and go, oh, that's better.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see it with your own eyes. It's good when you can see the performance right there in front of you. And certainly there are some players that we see on TV who are swinging as hard as they can, it seems, and they need to keep it straight. And that's obviously a benefit to anybody. And so once again, folks, we're talking to John and Zach. They are from TPT Golf. The website, by the way, everybody, is tptgolf.com. Be sure to go out there and check out all the great products. They have a wide range of products. Zach, I know you mentioned that there was an effort to kind of reallocate resources and focus on the driver shafts at first. I can see the sections on the website about other potential product lines. What do you got in store in the future for listeners who might want to expand to the iron, fairway, and other shafts?
Sure. I guess I might as well tease it on this show a little bit, even though we're a few days early. So, one of the most unique things about TPT is that it doesn't make a price point shaft. Every shaft that it launches is the most premium golf shaft that it can make. So while it's making shafts, say the 14 low, which is going to be for someone who swings as hard as Bryson DeChambeau or somebody in that category, it's also making shafts for golfers who don't swing very hard. Maybe a junior, maybe an amateur, maybe someone who's not very strong. So you're going to see the driver range with TPT expand to cover all swing speeds. And then you're also going to see TPT start to fill some holes that golfers have been asking about. We want fairway woods and we want hybrids. So, fairway woods would be heavier and more optimized versions of the driver shafts, and then hybrids would be something totally different altogether. So that's the order they're coming out. I'm not going to be too specific in the time frame, given what's going on in the golf world with Corona and everything. And but it's coming, and it's exciting to think that let's say somebody gets fit for a 17 low, right? It's exciting to think that I could then get a 17 series in my fairway wood, and a 17 series in my hybrid, and a 17 series in my irons, and a 17 series in my wedges, so that I know that every shaft I'm playing through the bag is consistent with every other club, and obviously some uniformity, consistency, precision. That's what TPT is all about.
That's fantastic, guys. And once again, that's tptgolf.com. You want to go out and check everything out that they have out there. John, Zach, I'm sure we could talk about this for hours, but we are up against the clock here. I do want to just say thank you for coming on. I know it's been a crazy industry out there so far. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy, and I hope things are picking up for both of you. We are certainly got our eyes peeled on TPT, and hopefully we can keep in touch. So we'll do this again in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam.